Joseph is one of the main characters of Genesis. Not Joseph, the father of Jesus, but rather the one with the rainbow jacket. But there's a lot more to Joseph than his Technicolor Dreamcoat. Here's the untold truth of Joseph in the Old Testament. As far as the canonical Bible goes, Joseph's appearances are pretty much limited to the last third of the book of Genesis. However, as the Jewish Encyclopedia points out, there is no patriarch who stars in as many traditional legends as Joseph, going all the way back to his birth. Rabbinical literature notes that Joseph was in many ways the spitting image of his father Jacob, not only in physical appearance, but in virtue. As a bodily symbol of Joseph's complete righteousness, legend says that he was born circumcised, so that no doubt saved a lot of discomfort. Commentaries on Genesis also say that the only reason the Red Sea parted for Moses later was the presence of the bones of Joseph. Furthermore, when Joseph and his mother met Jacob's brother Esau in Genesis 33, tradition says that Joseph kept his uncle from looking lasciviously at his mother by blocking her from view, and as a reward, Joseph and all of his descendants were made immune to the curse of the evil eye, which is no small thing in Jewish culture. If you only know one thing about Joseph, it's probably that he was at one point in possession of what you might call a coat of many colors if you're a Dolly Parton fan, or a Technicolor Dreamcoat if you're an Andrew Lloyd Webber fan. This coat was a gift from his father as a sign of Jacob's favoritism toward Joseph, which was either due to his being the first son of Jacob's favorite wife Rachel, or because he looked exactly like him depending on the account. This coat and the favoritism it represented was a major source of discord for Joseph's older brothers, and basically the inciting incident for Joseph's whole life story. As it turns out, the coat may not have been many-colored after all. As Old Testament professor Claude Mariottini explains, the tradition of calling it a coat of many colors stems from a mistranslation of the Greek version of Genesis. In fact, the Hebrew words to describe Joseph's coat have no known translation, and the words are only used one other time in the Bible, describing a special garment worn by a princess. Instead of being Technicolor, some scholars think Joseph's robe just had really long sleeves that may have reached all the way to the ground, or maybe it was just a super nice robe and had no particularly special characteristics at all beyond looking swank. Joseph's 11 older brothers had a number of reasons for being angry at him. Their dad loved him best, he had a cool jacket that none of them had, and Joseph ratted them out when they broke the rules. But the final straw had to be the dreams. According to Genesis 37, Joseph had two prophetic dreams that his brothers didn't like the sound of. In the first, all 12 brothers were out gathering grain when all the brothers' grain bundles suddenly started bowing down to Joseph's. In the second dream, the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars were all bowing to Joseph. Rightly interpreting that these celestial objects meant them and their mother and father, Joseph's brothers decided they weren't interested in bowing to their baby brother. Joseph's facility with prophetic dreams, both having and interpreting them, doesn't end there. In fact, in Genesis 37, he is referred to, derisively but accurately, by his brothers as, quote, the Lord of Dreams. And it's a good thing, too, because his prophetic dream powers eventually saved him and all of his people. Key to the story of Joseph is the moment when he was sold into slavery by his own brothers. The account in Genesis 37 tells us that it happened like this. Jacob sent Joseph to find his absent brothers, who it turned out were waiting to kill him. Joseph's eldest brother, Reuben, persuaded them instead to just strip him of his coat and throw him into a pit. Reuben planned to rescue Joseph later, but before he could, the brothers sold Joseph into slavery to some random people passing by. Then they gave the coat to their dad as proof that Joseph had been killed in an animal attack. That's the basic version of the story, but it's been embellished and expanded over the centuries. According to the legends of the Jews, it was actually the archangel Gabriel who helped Joseph find his brothers, who originally planned to murder Joseph with dogs until Reuben talked them out of it. For his part, Reuben was rewarded by being blessed with descendants who would be the first to offer help in times of trouble. In this version of the story, the pit Joseph was thrown into was full of snakes and scorpions, but the hand of the Lord protected him. Gabriel made Joseph a magical garment to replace his many-colored cloak because God thought it would be tacky for him to be a naked slave. After being sold somewhere between 1 and 5 times, depending on which rabbi you ask, Joseph found himself a slave in the household of Potiphar, the captain of the Pharaoh's guard in Egypt. According to the story in Genesis 39, Potiphar's wife had a thing for Joseph and tried to seduce him. When he rejected her, she accused him of assaulting her, leading Joseph to being thrown in jail. Of course, depending on who you believe, that's not all there is to the story. The Legends of the Jews has a whole bunch of tales about just how Potiphar's wife tried to seduce Joseph, from threat to promises of power to enchanted snacks. And there's also a whole theory that Potiphar himself might have tried to seduce Joseph as well. This spins out of the fact that Genesis 41 tells us Joseph eventually married the daughter of a priest named Potiphar. Since that sounds sorta like the feminine version of the name Potiphar, some rabbis came up with the idea that the archangel Gabriel removed Potiphar's genitals and that he then changed his name and became a priest, because that's clearly more likely than, a typo or something. Of course, the general story of a woman attempting to seduce a young man and then accusing him of assault when rejected appears as a common motif in ancient myth, but Joseph's story is the only one that hinges on a magic talking baby instead. Yes, the conclusion of the episode of Joseph in Potiphar's house, as described in Genesis chapter 40, shows Joseph running away from Potiphar's wife's advances, but she manages to snatch his robe off of him, which she uses as evidence of Joseph assaulting her. The result is Joseph being put in jail until he can dream interpret his way out of there. Fortunately, Legends of the Jews gives us more details. In the extended version of the story, Potiphar has Joseph whipped for his alleged crime. But when Joseph prays to be delivered from this unfair punishment at the hands of Gentiles, God causes Potiphar's newborn baby to start miraculously speaking.
Pretty stupid.
The baby tells him in full detail all of the wife's failed attempts to seduce Joseph, and that they should look at Joseph's lost robe more closely. Upon further inspection, Potiphar finds that Joseph's robe was ripped at the back, indicating that he was trying to run away. Although at this point Potiphar fully believes in Joseph's innocence, he must still put Joseph in prison to save his family from gaining a bad reputation.
I could not do such a thing. No, you couldn't. It goes against everything I've ever seen in you.
Joseph's reward for chastity and faithfulness to God is that he gets an extra letter H added to his name. Now called Jehoshaph, he is one letter closer to the sacred name of God, Yahweh. To make a long story short, Joseph gets out of prison by correctly interpreting the dreams of other prisoners and finds favor with Pharaoh by correctly predicting a cycle of famine and plenty. Pharaoh makes him a vizier, a position of high influence within Egypt. Then his brothers, affected by the famine, come to Egypt to buy grain, which the country has shrewdly stockpiled under Joseph's advice. His brothers don't recognize Joseph because they haven't seen him in like 20 years, and now he's dressed all Egyptian-like. In the canonical accounts, Joseph tests his brothers to see if they've grown any in the intervening years, which they have, and the brothers are joyfully reunited. The Jewish encyclopedia shows, however, that once again the rabbinical literature has a lot more to say about it. In this expanded account, Joseph anticipates his brothers coming for grain, and so has all petitioners submit the name of their father on entry to the city. That means he knows when the guys first arrive in town, but when they don't show up at the palace, Joseph sends men to look for them. The group is discovered at a brothel, allegedly because they were looking for Joseph, but come on. So Joseph messes with his brothers by claiming he used psychic powers to deduce that they are spies, and the ensuing fight between Joseph's angry brothers and his guards threatens to destroy all of Egypt. Fortunately, Joseph stopped the prank before it brought down the country. After Joseph gets his fill of almost destroying a mighty empire in order to mess with his older brothers, he reveals himself to them and he is reunited with his family. Joseph then convinces the Pharaoh to grant some land to his kin, and that's how the Israelites end up in Egypt, from which Moses will have to free them generations later. The book of Genesis ends with Joseph dying at the age of 110 and being buried in Egypt. Many years later, Moses takes Joseph's bones out of Egypt with him during the Exodus and reburies him on his father's land. The Jewish encyclopedia, however, tells us more specifically where Joseph's body was buried in Egypt. Apparently, Joseph was so beloved that the different districts wanted the honor of his being buried there. In the end, the compromise was to sink his coffin to the bottom of the Nile. During the Exodus, one of Joseph's nieces shows Moses where the body has been sunk. Moses summons the coffin by throwing a pebble into the water and telling Joseph that all the Jews are getting out of Egypt, and everyone is waiting on it. The coffin floats to the surface, and Moses himself carries Joseph's bones next to the Ark of the Covenant as the Israelites proceed to the Promised Land. Death isn't the end of Joseph's story, though. One of the core tenets of Jewish belief is the expectation of the arrival of a Messiah, meaning anointed one, who will usher in a new age of universal peace and brotherhood. Generally, this term is understood to apply to a descendant of the line of King David from the tribe of Judah, who will be the ultimate redeemer and liberator of mankind. Christians believe this figure, the Messiah ben David, has already arrived in the form of Jesus, also called the Christ, which is the Greek translation of Messiah. Perhaps less well known outside of the Jewish community is that since the time of the Second Temple, Jewish tradition has taught of a second Messiah, descended not from David, but from Joseph. This figure is known as Messiah ben Yosef, and he's fairly controversial. Some scholars believe he was basically made up by the rabbis over the centuries, while others insist that his story originates in the Torah. Either way, the general understanding of his role is that he will prepare the way for the coming of Messiah ben David by waging war against the enemies of Israel. After he falls in battle, a period of great calamity will befall the Jewish people before Messiah ben David arrives to usher in eternal peace. Thanks for watching. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.